Welcome to Mixed Media Creations with me, Creative Katie, Karen Burchill. Follow me on Instagram, www.instagram.com/CreativeKatie. Hit the subscribe button, and if you're already a subscriber, share my channel with a friend. Today we have a mixed media mini canvas tutorial entitled Cherish. This project is great for everyone, but it's perfect for a beginner. Recently, I did a video where I showed how to get that top layer of paper off of corrugated cardboard to reveal this wonderful, wonderful texture that you can use in your mixed media or art journaling projects. And I will put a link to that video in the iCard in the top right-hand corner. Now, when you rip off the top layer, you have this piece of paper. And as I was gathering them up to throw them out, I thought, oh, I bet I could do something with that as well. And so in this video, I'm going to do both. I'm going to use the corrugated cardboard and the paper that I removed from the top. So out of the corrugated cardboard, I cut a variety of hearts out. And I'm not sure which ones I'm going to use, but time will tell. So as my substrate, I am using this canvas board that happens to have a magnet on the back. Now, first thing, I'm taking some ripped pieces of paper that I ripped from the top layer of the cardboard and these hearts, and I'm just playing with the composition. And I've got some doilies on my desk, and I'm thinking, oh, I really like the contrast of the laciness of the doily and then the rusticness of the paper in the cardboard. When I work, I tend to have a lot of things around me that have been left over time, and I challenge myself to use those things. And it's amazing how many of them can find a purpose. So once I'm happy with a basic composition, I'm just using gel medium to glue down the pieces, the collage pieces that I'm using. Now, gel medium was right there, which is why I'm using it. I've also used Mod Podge, both with the matte finish. If I want shine, I'll put a gloss finish on the top layer, but if I don't want bits of parts to show that are shining through. So I'm just adding a little bit more of this lace because it'll add some interesting texture. Now, the layer that you put on the collage, it could be colored paper, scrapbook papers, brown paper from cardboard, the doilies, napkins, and the like. Now, some of this, and sometimes you end up keeping and preserving the colors that you see there, the patterns that are on these pieces. And other times you're not going to necessarily see that, but you are going to see the texture. Now, when you layer this paper, that brown paper is rather thick. So where you rip it, it has this ridge, and when you layer it, it gets even more ridges. And then you have that laciness of the doily, which is also going to add texture. Now, quite honestly, at this point, I don't know if I'm going to keep these the color that they are or if I'm going to alter it. I typically start most of my projects, I have a general idea, and I just get busy doing it. And the page or the project can just takes and evolves over time. When you're setting up the composition, don't overthink every single step and every piece of paper, because a lot of it, quite honestly, it doesn't really matter. I'm fussing a little bit here, but I did tell myself, you know what, Karen, just glue it down, put it down. It doesn't matter. And when I did the journaling by fives and I did the collage step as step one, and it's under that timed influence, I came up with some interesting compositions, and I didn't have time to think. So I'm sorry that this is a little bit off screen, but it I do correct it periodically. Now, when you have your background kind of set up, one thing I often do is I play around with the orientation. I turn the canvas. I can change my mind about which one is the top and which one is going to be the bottom. And quite often, I might be just start out and I'm thinking it's going portrait, and then I end up going landscape, or vice versa. So I'm using my script stamp and my archival black ink, and I'm just stamping onto the collage. And again, this is adding visual interest to my background. And I keep coming back with those focal hearts, those focal point hearts, just to see and kind of plan the next step. So I made a decision that I'm going to use some white gesso here and gesso this whole background. Now, yes, you can see the color of the paper off of the cardboard has kind of faded and muted, which I wanted. I didn't want as much of that contrast, as did some of that script. And I'm using a baby wipe to remove some of the gesso to see a little bit more of that script. When you're doing mixed media, you want to develop layers of interest. You want some things to appear that they are farther away, more in the distant, faded, and some things that are closer up. And this is one way that we create that. So I'm giving this a good dry. Little time for cleanup. And you can see, or hopefully you can see, how thick that paper is. It's giving some wonderful texture to this background. So much so that I've already decided at this point that that is a supply that I will continue to use in my mixed media. When I do my collage, I like getting collage pieces that have different weights. Some is deli paper, some is scrapbook paper. This one will give a different weight. Now I'm going in with two blue colors. One is Prussian blue and one is a craft paint kind of aqua teal. And I've set aside the brush. I love using my finger, especially when it's texturized. It just feels so good, and I'm working it into the nooks and crannies. Now the reason I'm using two colors is because I don't want this to be flat. I want interest. I want, differences. I want darker areas and lighter areas. And that's what's going to make your background really interesting. So as a beginner, if you simply use a couple similar colors, a light and a dark, you're going to have more interest. And as you can see, this is becoming more and more interesting. The dark that I'm lightly brushing over top is bringing out that texture. You can see the low points are still white. And I love that. Every little bit of that is adding interest to your background. Now, when you're using acrylic paint, you don't always want it to be blendy, so you need to stop and dry, and then you can add more, but if you add wet on wet, it's just going to blend out. I'm just kind of using the baby wipe and rubbing off some of the higher points, just to rub it back and give it that kind of distressed kind of look. Now, too much of the script got pushed back, and you can still see very faintly, but I'm coming in and giving just another layer of script on top of the acrylic. So I'm loving the background right now. It's there's so much interest and so much texture there. It is like the perfect background. Now I need to work on the focal point. And again, I had the idea that I was going to keep it very rustic and maybe keep it that brown color. But now that the background's done, I just wasn't feeling it. So I decided to give this a coat of gesso to prepare it to take whatever colors I wanted to give it. And, if you're a beginner, one of the things that I highly recommend that you get is a script stamp. It is a good general stamp that you can use on a multitude of projects. It's non-specific. And gesso is another one. And when it comes to gesso, you can get store brand gesso or the, Blix, or I get from an art supply store, Curry's. It's very inexpensive. So cheap, in fact, that it doesn't pay for me to make my own, and I really like it. And it's kind of a base. I use it in every single project. And I will put links in the description box below for those items that I really believe, are a good starting point that you should consider having, because you're going to get a lot of use out of them. Now these hearts, I'm kind of lightly brushing them. I kind of want to give that distressed look, and I'm putting a little bit of the blue and a little bit of the gold on. And I'm really not happy with it at this point in time. It's not popping as much as I want it to. I'm adding a little bit more blue, a little bit more gold. I'm just trying things out. Now, absolute worst case scenario, I throw this cardboard in the garbage and I cut out some more hearts. But that being said, you can put a coat of white gesso back on this, take it back to ground zero, and start again. So I'm kind of dry brushing it. And if the background was different, I think the way the hearts are now would be fine. Now I've got some gold on my brush, and I'm dry brushing it over the high points of this background. I want a little more gold into the background. Now, in an effort to make the focal point, the hearts, stand out, I am edging the hearts, and I'm not sure if that's my black or my blue archival. At some point I used both of them, and often I do that and it just gives a slightly different effect. You kind of double edge. And I'm just applying that with a makeup sponge. Now in the past I've tried using the makeup sponge and edging with the StazOn stamp pad, and I really didn't have much success with it. I'm having way better success, and I'm liking it way better using the archival. Not sure why. Then I decide, I need to edge my background here, just like I would edge pretty much every page in an art journal. And it just makes it pop and stand out just a little bit more. I want to add a little bit more gold to the background, so I've spread some of the gold paint on my craft mat, and I'm pressing my script stamp again, into it, and just stamping with the script stamp. Now, you could use different stamps here. I like to use the same stamp or the same stencil with different mediums and in different ways. I think that adds a lot of cohesiveness to your project. And in fact, I think one of the mistakes that I see people doing is putting too many different components on the same thing. So especially as a beginner, I suggest that you simplify. Use a stamp in a couple different ways. Use the stencil and put modeling paste through a stencil and stencil with the stencil, but keep it the same, or use different colors with the stencil. So here I decided I'm going to paint one of the hearts Prussian blue and one gold. Now it's popping off the background. Now they're popping off of each other. I edged the blue one with gold. I edged the gold one with blue. And I'm absolutely loving this. Now, if you're doing this, you can, and you want to copy what I'm doing here as a project, you can do the same thing. Pick different colors that you might like in the background. But then you can, learn from my mistakes or the evolution and go from there. One of my recent purchases is this script letter set, and I love it because it kind of looks like handwriting. And I am stamping into black acrylic paint in the top right hand corner, and then stamping it on. And then I just dab it on that wet baby wipe. And I've decided I'm going to put the word cherish. Now, those hearts aren't glued down yet. To make it easier, and I do move this one right now, but I'm kind of put them there because I want to know where they are to get the proper spacing. So there's the stamp set, and I will put a link to a similar one that I found in Amazon, because again, I think it's a good basic set to have that you're going to get lots of use of. I'm just kind of dry brushing it with the contrasting color, so gold on the blue and blue on the gold. And I'm just hitting those high points. I want it to look kind of rustic. So you see that the background has the same colors as the focal point. I'm using gel medium, and I'm applying a good amount of it to make sure that this will stick. And then because this bigger heart is lifting it up, I reach in my cupboard below and pull out some pop dots, foam adhesives. This one's a little too thick. And these are just ones I bought at the dollar store, foam tape and stuff. And I'm putting that on just to lift it up. So you're getting that, 3D effect. So I'm playing around with these foam adhesives. Now, I don't know that I would necessarily use this much 3D on an art journal page, but for a canvas or something else, I love adding that texture and having that 3D effect. Just kind of cleaning up the edges a little bit. Little final touches. And as you can see here, I cut the hearts so that the one heart is going, the corrugated parts are going left and right, and one's going top to bottom. Now, when I stamped, it's not quite opaque enough. Now, I often take my liner brush and the thinned acrylic paint and do it, but I thought, I'm going to see if I can do this with my fine liner bottle. And I'm just squirting a fine liner and just making this a little darker, a little more, so it would stand out. And I love doing it. It works so well. And this is just acrylic paint that's been thinned down in this fine liner bottle. And I'll put a link to those fine liner bottles in the description box. I got them at Christmas and I love them. I have found so many uses for them in so many projects as well. And whenever you use that fine liner, you need to stop and use the heat tool right away, because it's very wet paint and there's, a good layer of it. Then I decide to kind of do a scribbly line, border line around it. And this just frames this and centers, sets off your canvas, your mini canvas. So all in all, a fairly simple project, good for beginners. This has a magnet on it. It looks absolutely awesome on the fridge. I'm quite happy with it. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment below if you give it a try. Ask questions. Share the video with somebody that you know that might like it. Thank you so much for watching. I use the gloss medium and varnish after it dries and gave this a nice glossy finish. And here we have the finished product. And once again, we've had about a week of cloud and rain here on the island, and so, you know, it's a little bit, the pictures are a little bit dark, but you can see the texture and the interest. I hope you give this a try. Bye for now.